us a little bit about that and that whole situation.
Okay, well, to make sure everyone knows, Monique Worrell is my opponent in the race for state attorney here in Orange and Osceola County. I am the Republican candidate, and she is the Democrat, right? And she is eligible for re-election. So many people don't know that. Many people were aware of the conflicts and the controversy within that office. There were many public statements by then State Attorney Monique Worrell about how the law enforcement agencies in our community weren't doing their job. And then, alternatively, we had public statements by the sheriffs about the state attorney's office and how they weren't doing their job. There was a lot of complaint about the fact that law enforcement would investigate, they would arrest, and then cases were getting dismissed at a very, very high rate. And when cases weren't getting dismissed and the cases were getting resolved, whether it was a plea agreement or usually a plea agreement, those plea agreements were very, very lenient when it came down to the sentence, overly lenient. And so that's the crux of the conflict and the decision. As an elected official, then state attorney Monique Worrell was required to do her job. And, she claims that all she and her office were doing were expressing their prosecutorial discretion, which every prosecutor has the discretion of how to go forward on a case based on the strengths of the case, if they think they can prove it at trial and return a guilty verdict, the criminal history of the defendant. And that's true. The prosecutor does have prosecutorial discretion to an extent, but that discretion can be abused. If that discretion is used to dismiss every case that comes across the desk, then it's an abuse of discretion. Because if you're not prosecuting anything, then it's an abuse of discretion. You were elected to prosecute criminals. Alternatively, if you were, and I'm not claiming that the state attorney's office under Monique Worrell did not prosecute anything. I'm not claiming that. Mm-hmm. But it's just an extreme example so people can understand the difference between a prosecutor doing their job and a prosecutor exercising their discretion or instructing their assistant state attorneys to exercise their discretion. A lot of this has to do with training. There's a extreme lack of training within that office. There always has been. But I intend to dramatically increase the training of criminal law for the assistant state attorneys. They're all lawyers, and they're all very smart and motivated, and they want to do the right thing, and they're doing a public service. That's why they do that job, and I look forward to leading them. But ongoing training is essential, and that wasn't happening. Additionally, when Monique Worrell ran in 2020, she made it very clear that her political philosophy was that most people should not be put in jail. Just overarching. That's what I believe her political philosophy is, based on what I've seen her say when she was running. And that's similar to the state attorney before her, Aramis Ayala. Both of them have a similar mindset, similar outlook, and I don't agree with it. I believe in the deterrent effect of criminal punishment. That doesn't mean everyone should go to jail. The sentence needs to be determined based on what they did and their criminal history. Mm-hmm. And so many so many people were given lenient sentences because the assistant state attorneys got the message, whether it was explicit or implied, from State Attorney Monique Worrell, that their boss wanted them to be lenient. Their boss wanted people to be put on probation instead of jail. Their boss didn't think that, drug crimes were crimes because there's no victim. Meanwhile, there's plenty of evidence that the community is victimized by drug crime.
Yeah.
People who are addicted to drugs commit crimes. They steal, they rob, and then they sell the things they steal to fund their drug addiction. That doesn't mean that we just let them off the hook. My focus is on protecting the victim. And Monique Worrell really focuses so much on the defendant, how the defendant got to where they were in life, and why they committed a crime. That ignores the victim. That's my view on it. But as far as her challenge to the suspension, she made an argument in front of the Supreme Court. She's getting due process. The Supreme Court doesn't really have a place in this process other than a very basic review of the executive order. And there was an argument by the governor's office that this is a political question, which falls completely outside of the jurisdiction of any court. So what I expect to happen is that it most likely will, her challenge will not succeed in the Supreme Court, and it will go to the Florida State Senate, where she'll have effectively a trial, kind of like an impeachment. Okay. It's not technically considered an impeachment, but it's a trial where the Florida State senators are handling that, and they're the jury effectively.
So I had a chance and I looked up some of the information on the case, and hopefully my computer will work, because I wanted to just share that, because I didn't. Okay.
The Supreme Court case?
Exactly what Governor DeSantis was putting out there. So the executive order contains Monique Worrell evaded minimum mandatory sentences for gun crimes, drug trafficking, as well as enhanced sentences for repeat offenders. Worrell declined to seek enhancement sentences for convictions for repeat offenders. Worrell limited the charges against defendants charged with child pornography. Worrell delayed the processing of cases involving juvenile offenders and declined to direct, file, or juvenile felony cases. Worrell conduct cannot be excused. So those were the things that I was looking at. Is like, wow, these are the things that she was not doing. And so I actually noticed that the sheriffs decided to not endorse per se, but support Governor DeSantis in all of this. So he has the sheriff's backing in what he's doing, and they're saying that he's doing the right thing by enforcing this and removing her, because she's not really representing the constituents in her community.
Right. So just to be clear, the governor's filings are an allegation, right? So that's what he's accusing her of. She filed a response, attempting to counter that, and they had oral arguments where both sides presented their case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to make a decision. The the sheriffs, I think it's the Florida State Sheriff's Association, filed a friend of the court brief, which supported the governor's position. I've been having regular conversations for a long time with law enforcement. I still know plenty of people that work and have worked at the state attorney's office during Monique Worrell's administration and during Aramis Ayala's administration. A lot of people quit that office because they got a job there because they wanted to be prosecutors. And based on the administration's policies, and even if they're not explicitly written policies, a policy, that's an argument that Monique Worrell has been making. There's no explicitly written policy that says, don't enforce minimum mandatories or be light on people. But everyone knows within an organization, a policy doesn't have to be specifically written. If the elected official, through what they say over the course of time, whether it's while they're running or while they're operating and leading that office, communication, we're all trial lawyers in that office. So trial lawyers are supposed to be experts at communicating a message because we're supposed to convince a jury to rule in our favor. So her argument that there's no explicit written policy, I don't think is really very strong. Everything that she said on the campaign, everything that she did while running the office made it perfectly clear that, she didn't believe that certain minimum mandatories should be enforced, but it's the law. You have to enforce the law. The state attorney is not a legislator. The state attorney does not write the law. If she wanted to change the law, she could lobby, talk to the state legislators, and see if the law could get changed.
During the campaign, I did run into Monique Worrell on the campaign trail. I was working one of the other campaigns, and it was just not very nice. She was just, it was,
What did she say?
I brought it up. Well, I was out there with a friend. Election day, we were out there putting signs out on the ground, and it was Our People signs. So it was, at the time, Vina Francois was running for congressional seat District 10. And so we were collaboratively putting out signs for Vina. And of course, we were putting the Trump signs out and so on. And so we were at one of the community churches putting out signs, and her people were there, and they had a big old, what is it, like an icy truck giving out free ices to people. And so we were there in opposition of that. Not really in opposition. We were just minding our own business, putting our signs out. But her people would yank out our signs or put Monique Worrell signs in front of our signs and so on. And so the law was there, and they said to her people, look, and she was there physically. And they said to her her people, they says, look, you can't be doing that. You can't be covering other people's signs. And this was in the heart of that area. And so they didn't expect to see people that look like me, like her, to be, supporters of people like Trump. And so it was just, she was just real nasty about it. And I'll never forget the looks that she was giving me, because I was on a different team, that day. So, but I have seen her again.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, this is what, what we see in this environment. But I wanted to talk about something else that I encountered with her not too long ago, sometime this year. I went to a Maxwell Frost gun control, gun violence town hall that he had, and they were a group of other people there, including Monique Worrell. Sheriff Mina was there, and Mike Scott was also there. And so there was a panel of everybody. And she said then, I'm not looking to really, I prefer to do counseling for these people, not just, I don't want to lock people up per se. I'm really looking for a counseling sort of setup. And that's what, I says, well, how can you be the prosecutor and want to just counsel people? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and also, didn't you say it was about gun crime and gun
justice has nothing to do with putting people behind bars and everything to do with ensuring it never happens again.
Congressman Frost has put gun violence prevention at the heart of his political platform, and he's committed to seeing it through.
Every shooting that happens every day pushes us to ensure that we do something.
He held his first town hall on the issue in the Carver Shores neighborhood Thursday night. Among the crowd were local leaders like Commissioners, State Attorney Monique Worrell, and Sheriff John Mina. Families of shooting victims were there to shed light on the impact.
Tiana Judy Marie Major.
A moment of silence was held for all the lives lost.
In law enforcement, in the state attorney's office, we can only respond to gun violence after it happens. As a community, we have to put things in place to stop it from happening in the first place.
Speakers on the panel answered questions from the audience through written notes. Mental health, legislation to ban assault rifles, and addressing root causes of shootings were part of the discussion.
Because if I can get to the why, then that's the start, the beginning of trust, right? And then I can get to the what's next. What can I do to prevent you from falling into the same circumstances?
We heard mixed reaction from the audience.
I saw their heart. I saw the passion, even though they might not have had so many answers, but they let me know that they care.
It's the people. They're the ones pulling the trigger, and they're killing people. I want to be able to protect myself, and a gun is going to help me to do that.
Rep. Frost is sponsoring a bill to create a gun violence prevention office under the Department of Justice. It would collect and explore data on shootings and then find ways to change the law to prevent them in the future. His challenge is to get Republican lawmakers to join him in his fight.
We just got to keep pushing, and part of this has to do with the people pushing as well. Whether it's protesting, writing letters, ensuring you're voting for people who are actually going to vote for your self-interest and your kids and your community, all of that matters.
Like gun crime?
Yeah.
So you want to, I understand the conversation about wanting to help people with mental illness, let's say, as an example. But when you are attending an event specifically about fighting gun crime, and you're the prosecutor, and you're saying, I don't want to lock people up, and I want to counsel people. I mean, that's the job of a social worker, and that's what most people saw in Monique Worrell and in Aramis Ayala. They saw someone who wants to be a social worker, and that's great. Go be a social worker. Social work is wonderful. It's admirable. It helps our society. But the reality is that every organization has its own mission statement. You have organizations that are funded by the government. They're civil service organizations. Some help the homeless. Some help people with mental illness. Some people help with poverty or drug addiction. And those organizations are wonderful, and they should be funded. But the state attorney's office and law enforcement have a different mission statement. Their mission statement is to investigate crime and to prosecute and convict criminals. And while those organizations should all work together in partnership as much as we can, that's how our community as a whole gets safer. We can't place the responsibility of other organizations on the state attorney's office and on law enforcement. We don't ask a police officer to teach our kids math. We don't ask a prosecutor to solve homelessness in all of Orange and Osceola counties. That's not the way it works.
Yeah. Everybody has their job. Everybody has their place. Everybody has what, if you want to be, like you said, if she wants to be a counselor, then that's fine. You go and you be a counselor. But we need somebody to prosecute these criminals, because the crime is out of hand here, and every day the shootings are getting worse and worse and worse, and we need somebody to be able to handle that. And if you can't handle that, you should move on. And I don't see how it is that she's looking to run again for re-election when clearly you're not doing the job of what you're running for or what you were elected for.
Well, but that's the thing, Amania. If you were to ask her, and this, I haven't talked to her about this. In fact, I have never talked to her in my entire life. But I would imagine that she believes she was a great state attorney. I believe that she probably is of the opinion that she set goals that she wanted to do in the state attorney's office, and she accomplished those goals. Unfortunately for the people of Orange and Osceola County, her goals were to put less people in jail. And when you focus on putting less people in jail, you're ignoring the people who are the victims of those crimes. Most people follow the law. The vast majority of people do not commit crimes. Only a small percentage of people commit crimes. And a lot of those people that commit crimes repeat it over and over and over. I've spoken to many police officers and sheriff's deputies, and they know a lot of the names of the people. They know the people who are committing these crimes over and over and over. They arrest them while they're in custody. Surprisingly, I'm joking, not surprisingly, the crimes stop, right? Because these people are repeat offenders. And, no matter what your background, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, rich or poor, black or white, you deserve to live in safety. No one deserves to be a victim of crime. And when you go into the office of state attorney, you have to prioritize protecting victims and protecting the community. The defendant has a defense attorney to help them and fight for them in the criminal justice process. And then if the evidence is so great that it's very, very clear beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that this individual did commit a crime, they should be punished harshly enough where they learn that they can't just do whatever they want, that they have to change their behavior. And if they don't change their behavior, they're going to be removed from our community again. Because we're not talking about theory, political theory here. We're talking about people. Monique Worrell is always talking about the system, systemic problems.
Everything is systemic. Oh my God.
Systems are made up of people. Systems are made up of people, and we can't forget that. So yes, would it be better if we could improve public safety? Yes, that would be great. Let's do it. There are ways to do that. But everyone that has a kid, and I don't have a kid, but everyone alive was a kid. And we all know that sometimes you need a little tough love. And I've actually encountered many, many people, both when I was a prosecutor and since I've been a defense attorney, that have told me, and you might be surprised by this, told me that going to jail was actually the best thing that ever happened to them. And I'm not saying that this is everyone that goes to jail. I'm not saying everyone loves going to jail. I'm not saying that. Right. But for some people, they are caught in a cycle where they're hanging out with in the wrong crowds. They're doing the wrong things. They're focusing on the wrong things in their life. They're making excuses for themselves. They're making the wrong choices, and they can't get out of that cycle. And sometimes when someone goes to jail for committing a crime against another person, that time that they're spending there, they're being contemplative. They're thinking about their life.